Aaron and I are more on the multifamily. I know he's in pad splits. I'm more in fix and flips. So Airbnb has always been super interesting to me. But one at a time was never the. I feel like my idea. I love that you have a fund, surrounding these Airbnb properties because they can be pretty profitable and passive if you do it right. Welcome back to another episode of the Estate of Wealth podcast for your weekly dose of market updates and expert insights. I'm Barney Villa, and alongside me, as always, is Aaron Levitz. And today we have a special guest, Brett from the Hideaways. Thanks for being on here today, Brett. Why don't you tell everybody a little about what you do, what your fund looks like, and where you're at. You're in Colorado, yeah?
Yeah. I'm a little bit south of Denver, so south side.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys for bringing me on today. And as Barney said, I'm Brett. I am one of the managers here at the Hideaways. I handle all the acquisitions and financing. And as Barney said, we do have a fund. So we take money from investors, use it to buy our unique short-term rentals. If anybody wants to see those, feel free to head to our website, which is thehideaways.co. There you can see all of our interesting properties kind of spread out all around the United States. So think Airbnb, but all the cool categories on top. We try and fit in all those cool categories on top. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me, a little bit about what we do. So yeah.
Nice. That's great. Now you guys are typically around some of those outdoor attractions, right? Like national parks and things of that nature.
Correct. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a national park, but some sort of outdoor appeal for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And are most of those luxury rentals as well too?
I mean, luxury, especially in the Airbnb space, it's kind of subjective. I wouldn't call them luxury. They can be in the luxury price point, but we're not like don't walk into our units and expect like a $20,000 chair. Like that's not the experience we provide. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Airbnbs is kind of a neat space. I know Aaron and I are more on the multifamily. I know he's in pad splits. I'm more in fix and flips. So Airbnb has always been super interesting to me. But one at a time was never the. I feel like my idea. I love that you have a fund, surrounding these Airbnb properties because they can be pretty profitable and passive if you do it right.
Correct. Yeah, passive for the investors, not for the operators.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. Yeah, if you're. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I would prefer to invest passively in the Airbnb space. Someone else can operate it for me. That's not what you do, right? You do more capital raising, investor relations, and things like that.
Correct. Right? Yeah. There are three of us in charge of the company. So there's me, a guy named Mike, and a guy named Jordan. Mike and Jordan handle all the guest messaging, kind of the hands-on stuff. I'm more behind the scenes, spreadsheet numbers. Hey, we need money for this project, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally different responsibility than actually operating the
100%,
Airbnb.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. So we got a few personal questions here for you. Some a little interesting. And if you've listened to some of our previous podcasts, these are the same questions, and we're always very interested in our guest response. So let's kick it off right away and jump into the first one. So let's see. If you could live in any fictional home from a movie or TV show, which one would it be and why?
I would have to say the palace from Kung Fu Panda. I'm a big Kung Fu
Jade
Panda
Palace?
fan.
I love it.
That's right.
Me too. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that one. That's a great answer.
I like the Asian architecture that they have going, and getting to see the Furious 5 every day sounds amazing to me. So
what's that entryway called? The Hall of Warriors, where he kind of like destroys everything. That was
yeah.
The Jade Palace. I love it. That's a heck of a set of stairs to climb up too. So would it be in China? Would you put it anywhere else?
I would probably keep it there, like fitting with like the mountains and stuff. Like I've never been, so I don't know if it's really like that, but that's what I imagine.
I love it.
Hopefully it lives up to the hype.
Great answer. No, I love that. All right, next question. What's the funniest or most memorable real estate deal you've ever been a part of?
I mean, in hindsight, it's funny. At the time, I was extremely pissed.
It seems to always work out that way, right?
Yeah. It was the first ever rental I bought. And
Okay.
it was during COVID. So it was like 2021, I want to say. So like things were just coming back to in person, and it was a condo down in Denver. And I bought it off a guy off of Bigger Pockets, a pretty well-known agent there. And it was sight unseen, sort of. I put a contract in without seeing it, but I saw it during the inspection period and all was fine.
Sure.
But it came down to the closing table, and this was right after I had gotten my real estate license. So this was my first closing experience, which I'm really glad. My first closing experience was on one of my own rentals.
That's true.
And we showed up for closing, and I was there, and I just remember them saying, "Okay, we're going to have to go print out the documents now." I was like, "Okay, that makes sense." Like I would rather have you print it out beforehand. And closing was scheduled to start at 1:30. 2:30 rolled around. Documents were not in front of me. I was sitting in the conference room by myself. And I walked out to the front, and there was no front desk lady. I'm pretty sure it was just me and the closer in that day. So I was like, I don't know where she is. So I guess I'm just going to go back to the conference room and hope she comes back. And and then 3:30 rolls around. She finally comes in with the documents. I'm like, okay, all is going to be good. We're going to sign everything. And then she told me my second form of identification didn't count. Because I brought in my driver's license.
2-hour wait, of course.
After 2-hour wait, yeah. I brought in my driver's license and my health insurance card. And at the bottom of their title company emails, they listed the forms of identification that are acceptable. Medical insurance card was one of them. So I brought it, and I showed her in the room. I was like, "This." It says it at the bottom of your email. Like, this is a valid form of ID. And she's like, "No, it just doesn't work." And so I had to scrounge. I don't remember what else I got out of my wallet. It might have been like my old high school ID, but because it had my name on it, she's like, it counts. And
Well, it's always interesting too, because as you go through some of those, like I won't call them high stress, but unfamiliar situations, you're definitely a little bit on edge to make sure everything goes perfectly smooth. And a little wrench in the spokes never a good thing.
Yeah, never a good thing. And I've never gone back to that title company.
Do we want to name that title company?
Yeah,
no.
Let's leave them out.
Drop a comment in the chat if you guys want to know.
I'll be public about it. Check my Twitter.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. It's like the X. We'll check the X. Right?
Yeah. Check the X.
All right. I love it. Yeah. Title companies can be interesting. They're not all created equal. And, especially here in Colorado, they do all the paperwork for us, but us as real estate agents hold the liability. So it's always an interesting, conversation to have with the title company. Because, if you choose one that's very reputable, you can feel safe with them. But sometimes in these situations, it's like, well, I'm glad it closed. I'm glad everything was good. All right. Excellent. Next question here. If you had to describe your investment style in terms of a movie genre, comedy, drama, etc., what would it be and why?
I would have to say a Western for a couple reasons.
Okay. All right.
One, because you guys know me, I normally wear a cowboy hat,
Yes, you do.
Embody
That's true.
that
I was a little worried that it wasn't you that got on the call. I didn't recognize you without the cowboy hat.
Yeah. So I kind of have that, like cowboy-esque, like 6-shooter, that's what I feel like when I'm ripping out a deal. But also, it's kind of like we're paving our way in this space a little bit, especially in the fundraising world. Like, there aren't funds out there raising for unique vacation rentals and micro resorts that we're building. So it's like just blazing our own path. Yeah. It's funny because it's out east. It's basically the wild east of like Kentucky and Ohio. But I would describe that as the movie genre.
And is that only east because we're west of Kentucky?
Yeah.
Just
because it's east of where we are. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I don't know regions that well, but
it's a great answer though. I like the Western Q.
That's great.
It lends to the nature that you guys immerse yourself in.
Yeah, and Aaron's actually from Kentucky. I think you guys have talked about this before, but
Yep.
So, yeah.
Right around down in Louisville. So sort of
is that the Midwest? Is that still the Midwest?
It's hard to say. Some people say we're part of the South. Some people say we're the Midwest. I just say Kentucky.
Nice. No, I love that.
Let them interpret whatever Kentucky means.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love that. Can I tell him the inside joke? What do I call you? It's not that I forget Brett. It's just he looks so much like this celebrity. I think ever since day one I've met him, I can't help myself. Like,
well,
I think it's a compliment. I mean, he's a good looking dude. I'm not saying he's not.
We expect you to break out in song like Ed Sheeran every once in a while.
It's Ed Sheeran. Yep, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know if you've gotten that before, but we expect to see karaoke from you really soon.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Good to know. How do you guys know it's not me up on that stage right now?
Well, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. Yeah. Drop a comment in the chat, guys. Do you think Brett looks like Ed Sheeran? I do. I do. Tell me I'm wrong, though. I don't know. All right. Last question here. All right. Share a quirky. Oh, not the last question, but share a quirky or unexpected item that you've come across during a property inspection or walkthrough.
Yeah, there have been a few. You know, I work with a couple flippers, and flippers typically flip old homes or hoarder homes. I've seen it all. And in the old homes, my favorite part is when you go to like the light switch plate cover. You know, like there are some decorative ones.
Yes.
There's some really decorative ones. I've seen some very nude ones before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can all imagine what the switch is.
Yeah. So those have been very interesting to me. They've been very graphic.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you go into somebody else's home and, you know, things look fairly normal, and then you find that one thing and you're like, huh, that's truly unique.
Yeah. There is always that one thing.
Yeah. I think I've seen it with the electrical sockets as well, too.
Yeah.
Like the actual plugins. Yeah. Anyways, that's a good one. No, I like that. Yeah, I have seen that a few times. All right. Last question. If you could swap lives with any famous real estate mogul for a day, who would it be and what would you do?
Yeah. Well, you know, it would have to be one of two guys, either Grant Cardone or Nick Huber.
Okay, good choices.
Because I'm more curious. I am curious how much they actually do themselves versus their like virtual assistants.
That's completely fair question.
They tweet out all these things. Well, Nick Huber's not necessarily Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone does more videos, but Nick Huber tweets out like all these things, like how to be a better man, all this kind of stuff. And I'm just curious, what is his day-to-day life like to tell me how to be a better man? Like what superior experience does he have compared to us?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to like see what is the day in the life like.
Right. You want to understand how plugged into their business these guys actually.
Yeah. I really do. I really do.
Well, what are you going to do? Let's say you're Grant Cardone. What are you doing tomorrow?
Well, I'd have to check my calendar because ideally it would be scheduled out the night before with all of his productivity hacks.
True.
But then I would look at the spreadsheets that I can find and see like how many of these numbers are real versus fake, and like where's all this go? Because he has so many funds spread across so many properties, and you know you hear all those things online about that, how they're all scams and all that kind of stuff. I'm just curious, like where does the money actually go?
Yeah,
I don't know. So I'd want to look at the back end and see, and it'd probably take me a whole day to figure out the back end, like looking at all the spreadsheets across all the funds.
Then of course maybe end your day by taking the helicopter out.
Oh yeah. Just for
no. He's got two G5s. Forget the helicopter. I guess if you're going from Orlando to Miami, you could take the helicopter. But
it's true.
That guy moves, and I love that you brought him up because I feel like all of us kind of have that history with Grant. You know, he was definitely one of my first gurus. You know, I watched and got inspired by, and it really transformed my path, especially over the past 10 years in real estate. I mean, he's definitely been influential for me. I know he's been influential for Aaron, and that's good to hear you say it too, because I feel like it's it's kind of like learning music. I don't know if you play any music, but I learned on the piano, and then everything I learned after that, from the clarinet to the saxophone to the guitar, to the violin or other instruments that I played, I always revert back to those basics, the black and white keys. And that's kind of how I always think of Grant Cardone. He was one of those first, influential people in my real estate career. So I love that you mentioned him too, because I feel like we all have a history with Grant.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to answer those personal questions. Those were great answers. And let's just jump right into some of these articles. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. This is the first one I'm going to pop up here. This one says, Joshua Tree Real Estate slows down as sellers get off the Airbnb bandwagon. Wow, what an interesting headline, just right there alone. So curious to hear your thoughts right away, Brett, because I know, again, we're more in the multifamily space, but you are in the Airbnb space. So how do we feel about this bandwagon trend right now?
Yeah, I mean, in Joshua Tree especially, it comes down to just the economics of supply and demand. As you all know, if there are too many
Yep.
units in an area, demand's gonna naturally go down.
Yep.
And in the short-term rental space, we noticed a big boom and bust during COVID, and it affected every market differently. Some markets boomed, like Joshua Tree. Some markets busted, like Florida, Texas. Like
Mm.
some went through some really hard times. Typically, the more
Mm-hmm.
rural you got, the more they boomed. The more metropolitan you got, the more they busted. Like it just had the inverse effect. So Joshua Tree was definitely one that we saw an outsized demand for during COVID because you couldn't go anywhere else. Like
Yep.
the Airbnbs were pretty much the only thing you could do. Like staying in a hotel was
Right.
tough.
Yep.
And California population density, there's obviously a lot of people living there. So Joshua Tree was one of the few markets that got channeled into, especially because at the time it was affordable. Like I think they
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in the article too, but it was like the average cost to buy a home in 2020 in Joshua Tree it's like $250,000. Now
Mm-hmm.
some of these places are being listed for like 500,000, 750 at totally unsustainable valuations, and people are realizing that as the market softens. So luckily for us and our business, the markets we're in are kind of the opposite of that. Like we saw them bust during COVID, and now they're coming back to normal values and normal levels. And they're pretty rural too. So think Joshua Tree out in Kentucky. Like there's natural amenities there. It's beautiful. There are other houses in the area, but nowhere
Mm-hmm.
near as popular as Joshua Tree. Like you'll
Yeah,
never
I think you're
find.
right. I think it was that thing, you had COVID and it was the perfect storm to really, push those Airbnb rentals out there. And it's always interesting because I think when a property does well on Airbnb, it's pushed on to a VRBO and some of those other sites that they're able to utilize and kind of really drive that traffic too.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think most of it was just the supply waning after COVID.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and we talked about this a little earlier, but like I think if you are going to buy Airbnbs, the strategy is so important, to where you're going to buy it, what amenities are around it, what attractions, why would someone even want to stay, in this Airbnb in the city of your choosing? So there's a lot of, research, of, not only demographics, but what type of schools or what event centers you're close to. I think it's super important to take that into account, and I think it's this. Like we're saying, this article speaks directly to Joshua Tree, having this bust. I don't think that the rest of the country is having this bust per se, but essentially, when it comes to having an Airbnb, a strategy is extremely important. I think I mentioned this before too. It's like for me, anyways, I wouldn't want to just buy one Airbnb. I really like, Brett's company, the Hideaways. I think it's really cool to develop a fund around it, so you have more than one asset, that you're investing in. You can diversify, a little bit more. So if one does go down, another one could go up as well too. So,
Correct.
all right. So the next article we have up is Airbnb squatters taunt single mom with no trespassing sign as she loses months of income because she can't kick them out. And so right away, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down so you guys can see this sign. It is pretty real.
Creative.
And this is super interesting. And this is, not only is this an Airbnb, but Aaron can speak to this a little bit too, because he does pad splits and has lots of roommates who rent by the room. So what are your thoughts on this? Have you ever seen this before, Aaron?
I've never seen this take place in a home that is a shared or a co-living space, right? I of course have seen like evictions take place in single family or multifamily residences, but this no trespassing sign is a creative way to kind of, I guess, stand your ground as a squatter. There's conversation around how smart these squatters actually are, and moving into properties, understanding the laws, and intentionally taking advantage of somebody to squat is obviously what they're doing here, right? It's interesting to me too, because if the Airbnb is not your primary residence, there's a little bit of gray space there that obviously this squatter can play with, where if this were to take place in a house hack or co-living, and you're living in that home as your primary residence and not a rental, I don't know how fast this would hold up, if you will.
Yeah, it's such an interesting case, because I mean, there are many different ways that you can Airbnb. You can Airbnb an entire house, you can Airbnb a room, you can Airbnb a separate entrance if you want to. How about you, Brett? Have you ever had to deal with any eviction issues in any of your Airbnbs?
Yeah. So we've had one throughout our company's
Okay.
operating history, and it happened pretty recently. And I mean, just to preface, there are some things to be worried about as far as Airbnb bookings go. Like there are some fishy signs that everybody knows. Like if your average booking stays 3 days and somebody books 29 days, it's like, oh, that's of concern because 29 days is at minimum to get
Mm.
squatters rights and stuff like that. Um, but we've had an experience. One of my business partners specifically, because he was the one dealing with it out in Georgia. We had a rental arbitrage person come in because we were sick. The property manager was just sick of managing it, so we had somebody come in and say, "Hey, I will rent it from you and I'll sublet it basically through
Hmm.
Airbnb and take the
Hmm.
cut." That's what
Yep.
rental arbitrage is through Airbnb. And
Right. Right.
so he came in, he paid for the first month, did not pay the second month, stopped answering all our communication. So luckily, since we're in Georgia, it was very easy to go evict him. We called the HOA because the property was in like a gated community. So we called the HOA and revoked his gate code access so he couldn't enter. And then the guy flew out there and changed locks and pretty much was all done. Like in Georgia, it's super simple. It took maybe 5 days for the court case. Luckily for us, most of the markets we're in, like Kentucky, Arkansas, Ohio, like we just call the squatter squad, and there's like 6 guys with shotguns who come burling in the door, and they're not going to stop you. Like the cops out there
Wait.
don't
Wait.
care.
Wait. Back up. The squatter squad.
Yeah, so there are a couple of companies out there that'll
Oh, I
remove
love
squatters
that.
for you. So there's one
Oh,
in
I love that.
California, which is super viral on Instagram. You guys should look them up. I'm pretty sure they're
Okay.
called the Squatter Squad. But
Okay.
out in these markets, we just, I mean, it's not always an official company. Sometimes we'll call friends or
Sure.
builders if we need to. But if
Hmm.
we sign a lease with them, they have legal right to access the property and then make life a living hell for the squatters until the squatters leave.
Wow.
And they're terrifying dudes. So I would never
Sure.
want to be in the receiving end of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and you're right. It's one of those states that has landlord-friendly laws where it sounds like within 5 days you guys were able to remedy that situation, and kind of get back on track.
Correct. Yeah. We find more and more our buy box is shrinking to not necessarily landlord friendly states, but the states we're in they happen to be landlord friendly as well.
Yeah.
No, I mean that makes 100% sense. We did a YouTube video a few videos back that you guys should go and check out about Colorado, and it is not landlord friendly over here. And in that YouTube video, I talked about how it's such an interesting juxtaposition because don't get me wrong, there are some shitty landlords out there. I'll be honest about it. There are some places that you call them slumlords, or next to some of these universities where they just start packing in these kids and they just live in such terrible conditions. And I understand that from that perspective, but on the other side of things, it's like if you have a squatter in there that will not get out, I feel like the government should help protect you, against these squatters. I mean, it's just such a crazy issue these days. And here in Colorado, it's kind of flip flopping both ways because we do have some crappy property management companies out here that are not doing some nice things. And you can go check out that article or that YouTube video that we did, and it'll go into much more detail. But yeah, it's always just an unfortunate situation with squatters.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our last article. All right, here we go. Let me make sure it's up on the screen. All right. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier with Brett, and he saw this in live time. This happened a few days ago. But this article is entitled "Traveler's Airbnb Horror Story Goes Viral on X." And for those of you who aren't familiar, X is the new name of Twitter. I know I'm not a tweeter or whatever they're calling it now. But anyways, Traveler's Airbnb horror story goes viral. Why don't you kick us off on that one, Brett? What happened there?
Yeah. So this guy named Brandon, he was checking into an Airbnb in London pretty early in the morning. It says 2:30 a.m., which for reference, most check-ins happen from 4 to 8 p.m.
Right.
Or like Airbnb did a stat on it. Like but I mean, systems should still be in place for 3 a.m. check-ins too, because if they book it, they deserve to stay there. Like they pay you, you have to provide accommodation. And it sounds like he had issues getting into the Airbnb, like the access didn't work with the lockbox. It sounds like the host wasn't too helpful. And then they reached out to Airbnb support, which I'm going to watch my words here because this is public, but Airbnb support is not the most friendly for any side, guest or host. They're not super helpful, especially in situations like this where emotions are high. It's early in the morning and you have to get in somewhere. Like they don't move on a quick time frame, which is not necessarily Airbnb support's fault. Like there are a lot of parties involved because you got
of course,
guests, the host, support, all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like he had a lot of issues with that. And I think all in all, there were a lot of things that went wrong. One, using a lockbox for people to enter your rental is a big no-no for us and any quality Airbnb host. It's always electronic locks, and the backup is a physical lockbox because obviously things can fail, like if it runs out of batteries. But having those systems in place is super important for an Airbnb host. And then, I mean, it also sounds like the host was not. I did read in his tweets. I don't know if it shows in this article, but that the host charged an extra fee for late check-in, which to me makes absolutely no sense. Like a fee for early check-in, probably, but late check-in, they booked the night, so they're already entitled to be there. So it doesn't matter what time they check in after that.
Right.
So it sounds like the host was probably not the best host in the world either, unfortunately. And I mean, that just happens with Airbnb. There are a lot of bad Airbnb hosts out there. Like there are a lot of bad landlords. Like there are some really crappy Airbnb hosts.
I think it's always interesting when people in the Airbnb space forget that they're in the hospitality and service industry first, and Airbnb comes second to that.
Yeah, that's an extremely fair point. And I've said this before, but I don't own any Airbnbs myself, but I've frequented a lot of Airbnbs and been a guest in quite a number of them all throughout the country. And I always compare them to hotels. And, in college, I actually used to be a night auditor for a hotel. So I used to check in a lot of people, at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And there was no fee for that. I mean, there was, like Brett said, there's always an issue. Like if check-in's at 3 and they want to check in at 1 or 11, they can't be accommodated. Sometimes it can't be, because of turnover and things like that. But I could see charging a fee on that end. But I mean, if someone comes in at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., that's on them. They were already charged for the room. So I found that kind of interesting. And I'll always remember being in Sedona, Arizona for the very first time. We rented this beautiful Airbnb. It was right along the creek, and it was super beautiful. It had walking distance to the water. I mean, it was a great location. And I lost the key. We were out downtown and we were driving around looking at all the sites and all the different, beautiful things that Sedona has to offer. And we got home and I did not have the key. So I had to call the Airbnb host, who actually ended up being the owner directly. And he said, "I'm so sorry. Usually there's more than one key." And he actually allowed me to break a window in the garage in order for me to crawl through it and get in. So I'll never forget. I actually asked him, I said, "You're going to need to send me this in writing before I do anything, to cause damage to your property." But he was actually super accommodating. And he sent an email over right away saying, "I gave you permission, to break a window." I actually took a video of it. Maybe I'll pull it up somewhere, but it was absolutely hilarious. And we broke in and got in. But that was just one good story, about a good Airbnb host. So this one is just turned out a little terrible for this guy. So I feel bad for him, but like Brett said, not all Airbnb hosts are created equal.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of these horror stories turn into Airbnb versus hotel. I mean, that's been the argument for a very long time. That's the argument that this guy made too. And a part of me understands, like hotel, you'd have somebody at the desk willing to check you in instead of having to figure it out yourself through Airbnb. Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah. There are benefits and drawbacks as there are to anything. So
yeah. And I think for me, it's more about, the type of trip that I'm taking. Aaron and I go on a lot of these conferences. We were just in Salt Lake last month and we were in Phoenix the month before. And, we rented hotels because we were only there for a couple of nights. And then the one time we went with a couple of friends, we rented an Airbnb. And I think that's, where the Airbnb comes into play, especially for me with my family. They like to come out here to Colorado and run a huge Airbnb for 8 to 10 of us to stay for a weekend, to vacation to see the aspen and the fall colors. And I feel like one of the best ways to do it is if you're with a whole group of people, why not get a house? Why get separate hotel rooms? But if it is just going to be a quick weekend, maybe you do rent that single room. I think when I was looking to go down to that conference in Phoenix, I was looking at renting someone's single room. I think it was much cheaper, than being in a hotel. So I think it kind of comes down to convenience, which side of the coin you're on and which one you want. But most of the time, I actually would prefer to Airbnb because you have the whole space. You have maybe a little backyard space with maybe a little view or like a fireplace in the back. But anyways, it just comes down to what you're really going to use the facility for. So. All right. Well, that is the last article we had up there for us to review. I just think that was funny. X goes viral. But anyways, I just want to thank Brett for being on here today with us. And if you made it this far in the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And drop us a comment down below, guys. If you liked what we talked about here today, or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions. But let us know. Did you like these articles? Did you not like these articles? But again, thanks everybody for watching, and I appreciate you being here. And we'll see you on the next one, guys. Take care.